Welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. The Unstoppable Freedom Alliance is creating a movement of millions of everyday Americans with a passion for freedom. And even though freedom is under attack everywhere in American life and even around the world, here's the good news. There is a growing movement across the country to do something, to stand up, to fight back and defend our liberties. Well, today we're joined by someone who is doing just that. Our guest today is Mike Berry, General Counsel for First Liberty Institute. Mike, welcome to Unstoppable Freedom.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
You bet, man. I know your schedule's tight, but we're going to make the most of our time. You know, I have really enjoyed getting to know you over the last several months, but as we get started, let me tell our audience a little bit more about you. Okay, Mike is the General Counsel for First Liberty Institute. He joined First Liberty in 2013 after serving for 7 years on active duty as an attorney with the U.S. Marine Corps. Among your numerous positions within the Marine Corps, you deployed to Afghanistan in 2008, and from 2009 to 2012, you served as an adjunct professor of law at the U.S. Naval Academy. Mr. Berry continues to proudly serve our nation as a member of the Marine Corps Reserve, and as General Counsel for First Liberty, Mike is responsible for leading all aspects of First Liberty's legal operations. He's testified before Congress. He speaks across the nation about religious freedom. This I found really interesting. You earned your bachelor's degree at Texas A&M. That's forgivable. But the other one, the law degree from Ohio State University, seriously, I'm going to have to press in on that a little bit. But most importantly, Mike's a man of God, and you're going to truly love this guy. Okay, so I want to start just by telling you thanks. Thanks for serving as a Marine. Our audience really respects and honors your service. Really thankful for that.
Well, it's certainly a privilege and an honor to serve. So thank you for that.
You bet. I got to tell you, after 9/11, little fact about me, I actually called the Marine Corps recruiting station and asked if I was too old to enlist. And I probably my wife is thankful that I was, but I wanted to. I was compelled by what was happening in the world, and it was it was motivating me to do that. All right. Listen to this. You taught at the Naval Academy. You know, we were neighbors then. I lived in Maryland, and we were down near the U.S. Naval Academy quite a bit. Did you live there for a number of years then?
We did. We lived in Annapolis, not too far from the Academy grounds. We were just up, maybe a mile from downtown Annapolis.
That is a gorgeous part of the country, isn't it?
It is. It is. We miss it a lot. We've still got a lot of good friends there. A lot of good memories, but we are Texans through and through. So we had to make it back to the promised land.
I'm telling you, picked the right spot. Well, listen, I know you graduated from Ohio State, but seriously, do you really have to say the Ohio State every time that comes up?
Well, it is the Ohio State University.
And I'm telling you, it's getting old already. It's getting old, but well, let's get into the show. I know our audience is excited to hear about what you're doing with First Liberty. Well, first of all, what was it like serving as a Marine and being deployed to Afghanistan? What was that like?
Boy, it's actually a question I haven't gotten in quite a while. It gets further and further in the rearview mirror, as each year goes by. So, first I would say being in the Marine Corps was certainly one of the most rewarding and fulfilling experiences of my life. I joined. Sort of similar story to you. I joined right after 9/11. That was a large motivation for me to join the military. I guess that means I'm younger than you. So
I knew that was coming.
But so being a Marine was something that I felt called to. All right. So quick digression, just a little bit more about my background.
Yeah.
When I went to Texas A&M, I went there on a full ROTC scholarship, but it was an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And I wanted to be a pilot or something like that in the Air Force. And when I got to Texas A&M as a young, 18, 19-year-old punk, really, who had no, I did not have my wits about me. I was very immature, intellectually as well as spiritually. And I thought that college was really, what I had seen in the movies, Animal House and and things like that. I thought college was going to be the greatest time of my life, for going out and having fun. And I really wasn't ready for the demands and the level of maturity that it required to do something like ROTC, which is it's like having a second job. It's like, we often talk about student athletes and the responsibilities and demands that are put on their time. Being an ROTC at a place like Texas A&M, which really has a full-on military academy component to it, is very similar. And I was not ready for that. I was not prepared and equipped for what that required of me. And I very quickly, I'll just make a long story short. I did not finish at Texas A&M in the ROTC. I gave up my full Air Force scholarship. Wow. And but much to my parents' chagrin, because
I'm sure they were excited about that.
Yeah, he was really, really happy when I told him that I was giving up that full ride. But
I would have loved to have been there for that conversation.
My dad's a very patient man, fortunately for me. So, I ended up looking for a job, and I was newlywed. I'd only been married for just a little over a year, maybe a year, not even a year and a half at that point.
So you really needed to be employed at that point.
Yeah, it's a way to impress the new father-in-law, right? Like,
Classic.
Yeah. So again, a long story short, I started looking for opportunities. I had a lot of interviews because I had a degree from Texas A&M, which is, a pretty reputable school. It was in a field that was pretty highly sought after, information technology and operations management, that kind of stuff. But I got to tell you, every job interview I had, when they started telling me about what the job was, I was just like, this sounds awful. This just does not sound like what I want to be doing with my life. And I began praying about it and say, God, what do you want me to do? And as I mentioned earlier, that there was just that thing in the back of my mind that just kept saying, like, you need to serve, especially right now with everything that's happening in our country, and we've just been attacked. And it's like, this is the time to, and I looked at my situation. So I was newly married, but we didn't have any kids. We did not have a mortgage. We just lived in a little, 2-bedroom apartment outside of Dallas, Texas. And I mean, the only bills we had were college loans and a car payment, and that's it. And so I was like, I've never been more positioned to go do this than right now, because, it's only really going to be affecting 2 people.
Right.
And so I joined. I joined the Marine Corps. So that was what led me to join.
It's amazing.
And so your question was, what was it like being in the Marines and then being deployed to Afghanistan? Yeah. So from day one, I really joined the Marines because I felt like that's what I was called to do. I felt like when I talk to young audiences today, especially if I go to a school or a university and I talk, and people will ask me sometimes, what advice do you have for young people? And I always say, I didn't come up with this, but I use it because I love it so much. And I said, the 2 most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And love that. And once you find out why you were created and why God put you on this planet, I said, you better pursue that with near reckless abandon, not reckless abandon, but near reckless abandon. Right. And pursue it passionately with everything you have. And that's the way I approached the Marine Corps. I wanted to be the best Marine I could be. I wanted to do everything. I wanted every experience I could possibly get as a Marine. And I loved being a Marine. I still do.
It's phenomenal.
I love the Marine
jealous.
Corps.
I have to tell you, I am jealous. I have a history of military service in my family, going all the way back to the American Revolution. I'm an eighth generation descendant, son of the American Revolution. So I have that in my background, and to have not served in that way, I always have felt like, boy, there's just something missing. But I think that's part of why I'm so excited about serving, leading the Unstoppable Freedom Alliance, because I get to enter into the fray. I get to work with people like you, with our military and others, and really fight for freedom in the way that God has wired me. So you talked about calling. and I always talk about there, you have a calling and a cause, and both of those, one is you're called by God into his service. And then the question becomes, what's the cause? What's the thing bigger than you that you can pursue? And like you said, you don't pursue something that's not a calling or a cause with that reckless abandon, if you will, if it's something you're not passionate about.
Yeah. One of my favorite films of all time is Chariots of Fire. And I know many, who are with us have probably seen it.
Yep.
But if you haven't seen it, I'm not necessarily giving anything. Well, it may be a little bit of a spoiler.
Spoiler alert. Okay, we're ready.
A little bit of a spoiler alert, but there's a scene that's just always stood out to me. And it's the scene when Eric Liddell, who's the main character of the movie, and he is an Olympic runner. And this is back, I can't remember what year it was, but early 20th century, early 1900s. And I think it was the Paris Olympics. So whatever year that was. And Eric Liddell was running. It was an athlete for Great Britain. He was originally from Scotland. I used to live in Scotland, so I sort of have an affinity for Eric Liddell from that perspective as well. And I'm also a runner. So, or at least I used to be. Father Time is catching up to me.
I understand that. Don't even start.
But there's this scene when Eric's sister is pleading with him to become a missionary in China, because they're believers and they believe in missions and the importance of evangelism and going and doing overseas missions. And Eric, and so in this powerful scene, Eric, and you'll see where I'm going with this in just a second here. So Eric says to his sister, and he finally kind of comes to his decision, and he has this choice, right? Be a missionary or be an Olympic athlete. And he's wrestling with God and with himself over this dilemma. And he finally comes to his sister and he says to her, I believe that God has called me to be a missionary. And she's like, oh, thank you for finally, seeing things my way, essentially is what, and she's relieved. And she says, okay, now, all right, no, can we dispense with this Olympic running nonsense and let's get on the first boat to China and that kind of thing, right? But then he stops and he says, but God made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure upon me. And to deny that would be to hold him in contempt. And that's how I feel that's how I try to approach life. And that's how I approached being a Marine, is that, there are many things, there are many causes, like you said, Jimmy, that I can throw myself behind, that I believe in, whether it's the First Amendment, whether it's religious freedom, free speech, the Second Amendment, pro-life, et cetera. There's a lot of great causes out there. But I always tell people, find that thing, whatever it is in your life, to where when you do it, you feel God's pleasure upon you. That God is saying, this is why I've created you. And then conversely, if you were to deny it, you would be holding God in contempt.
Yeah.
So that was, for me, a big part of that was being a Marine. And I also knew that being a Marine meant that you had to do Marine things, right? And during a time of conflict, that can mean going into harm's way.
Yeah.
And so before I left for Afghanistan in 2008, I'll be honest, I was scared. I knew that we were going into a very dangerous part of Afghanistan. I knew, based upon the type of unit that I was attached to and the mission that we had been given, that this was not going to be right. So that
you knew it was going to be conflict.
Yeah.
You knew you were going to be heading into danger, and that you had a specific role to play, and so you knew what was ahead, I would imagine.
Yeah. And to paraphrase from George Orwell and his seminal book Animal Farm, all military service is dangerous, but not all military service is the same type of dangerous, right? Some types of military service is more dangerous than others.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of friends who are, and through no fault of their own, and not to any discredit, but a lot of friends who their deployment experience primarily consisted of being on a very well fortified and protected air base, where they had a lot of, first world amenities, air conditioning, internet, video games, steak and lobster in the chow hall on Fridays.
I'm ready.
And my deployment experience.
Are you part of the recruiting team right now? I mean, what are you doing? What's happening right now?
So Afghanistan in 2008 was a far cry from that. The way I describe it is everything that I cared about on this planet had to fit within my backpack. So all of my earthly possessions had to fit into my rucksack. And the most important things were water, food, and ammunition. Right. I mean, that and not even necessarily in that order.
Right.
I got to talk to my wife once a month on a satellite phone for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
And so anybody who's ever been in that sort of experience, whether you've been a missionary in a remote, austere area of the world, you know that when you only talk for 15 minutes a month to your loved ones, it's hard to have those conversations because it ends up being a lot of small talk because you can't get into anything deep or heavy in 15 minutes and then delay it for another month. So you end up just having a lot of small talk and it's not particularly satisfying. And there comes a point when you're like, you know what? I'd almost rather not do the call except for the fact that you feel obligated to call your wife. Right. So,
well, there's a lot of stress, I think, on military families. And I know that, serving in that capacity on the front lines is a big sacrifice, but interesting. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that you're serving in a different way on the front lines. So there's this battle for freedom in a military sense and maybe in a political sense around the world, but there's also a real fight for freedom here. And one of the things that interests me most, and I think our audience, I've got several good friends and business partners who are retired Navy SEALs. And you're currently involved in a very high profile case that relates to both religious and medical freedom, as you represent 35 U.S. Navy SEALs and Naval Special Warfare personnel. In many ways, you're taking on the Department of Defense. I mean, in fact, you are. Tell us about this case. Tell us about where we are today. Are we winning? Are we losing? What's happening there?
Well, the case involves, as you said, 35 Navy SEALs and other special warfare members. First Liberty Institute, our law firm, represents these SEALs and other special warfare operators who each one of them has a sincere religious objection to the COVID-19 vaccine. And they've asked for religious accommodations from the vaccine. And every single one of them has been denied. And from a
no one received accommodation. Not a single one received accommodation.
Well, and that's correct. And not just our clients, but actually across the entire Department of Defense. All right. Wow. So whether you're Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, there have been no religious exemptions, period, from the vaccine. None, zero, not one. And yet tens of thousands of these requests have been submitted.
Incredible.
Contrast
I mean,
that.
I didn't know that. I don't think anybody knows that. I mean, some people do. You do. You're an insider, but we see 35, and what we don't see is that literally the tens of thousands of others who have submitted and also been denied.
That's correct.
Wow.
And the Department of Defense publicly states this. I think they're actually proud of it.
Wow.
I think they think that it somehow shows that they're being consistent or treating everybody the same. The real irony here, or not even irony, but just the real outrage, is that although they have granted zero religious accommodations, they have publicly stated that they've granted hundreds, possibly even thousands of medical and administrative exemptions.
Yes.
So that's a public statement by the Department of Defense that we are treating religion as if it is a second class, second tier legal status.
Gosh.
And that is unconstitutional. It's unlawful. And that is the argument that we made in court, is that you cannot have let me back up, Jimmy, to be clear.
Yeah.
This lawsuit that we filed did not challenge the actual vaccine mandate itself.
Okay.
There are other lawsuits out there that have done that.
Yeah.
Ours is saying, look, if the Department of Defense wants to issue a vaccine mandate, it can do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Department of Defense, the Pentagon issues orders and directives and regulations all the time. Mm-hmm. Issuing orders is what the military does. Mm-hmm. And generally, yes, our troops are required to follow orders with one very important caveat. And that is that the order has to be lawful. It cannot conflict with or abrogate the constitutional rights of those to whom it applies. And that's exactly what's happened here.
Okay, so real quick.
Sorry?
Real quick. That is fascinating, because there is a prevailing narrative that when you join the military, you suspend your constitutional rights, that somehow, hey, now you're property of the state, you're property of the government, and now you don't have the same protections. I mean, I hear that.
Right. And you know, the old saying that maybe our dads or our grandfathers would say back in the day was, when I was in the Army, you know, we always told if the Army wanted you to have a wife, they'd issue you one, right? Or if the Army wanted you to have an opinion, they would issue you one. Those, you know, that's what you would hear from the greatest generation. Okay. Yeah. But it is a myth. And it's a myth that we learned. It's a lesson that we learned the hard way through places like Nuremberg. Yeah. Right. So if you're a student of World War II history, you know that Nuremberg is where we had the trials for all the war criminals that came out of Nazi Germany. And many of them tried to argue, I was just following orders. I was ordered to execute all those Jewish people in the concentration camp. I was just following orders. And it didn't work in a court of law. They said, no, you don't get the right to kill somebody, to murder them and say, well, I was just following my orders. And that was Nazi Germany. The United States itself learned this lesson at a place called My Lai. If you're a student of Vietnam history, you know that during the Vietnam conflict, there was this thing called the My Lai massacre. It was a tragedy. And the American officer who was held accountable, his name was William Calley, that's what he said. I was just following orders. And in the American system of justice, we said, no, you don't get to use that as an excuse, because you not only are you not obligated to follow an unlawful order, you have a duty to challenge an unlawful order. Wow. And so to bring that full circle, that's what we have here with our Navy SEALs is if somebody issues you an order to do something that violates your constitutional rights, you have no obligation to follow that order. And so that was really the main argument we made in court, was that this order violates the Constitution. Love it. Because the Department of Defense is not allowing for people of faith, regardless of what faith they happen to be, Christian, Jewish, whatever, right? That if you have a sincere religious objection to this vaccine, it's a foregone conclusion. It is a predetermined outcome that your exemption request is going to be denied. And like I said a few minutes ago, so that in and of itself is wrong. But then when you add to that the fact that the Department of Defense has granted hundreds, maybe even thousands of non-religious exemptions, now you have a situation where they're treating non-religious categories more favorably than they're treating religion. And our Constitution, our First Amendment says you don't get to do that. The government cannot do that.
I love that. I mean, this is such a strong argument, right? And I know you've gone to court, you've made arguments. I know that we've won at least we have a temporary win on the board for sure. And I was struck by a couple of things that were said about this. I know the judge said the Navy service members in this case seek to vindicate the very freedoms they have sacrificed so much to protect. The COVID-19 pandemic provides the government no license to abrogate those freedoms. There is no COVID-19. I want to say this strongly. There is no COVID-19 exception to the First Amendment, and there's no military exclusion from our Constitution. I love the way the judge found that to be true? Because I think that's your very argument, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And one really important historical point that needs to be made here, because as you can imagine, there are people who are not happy with this decision and who say, but this is a pandemic, right? Even though it's a pandemic with a 99 point something percent survivability rate.
Yes.
And the vaccines have now been shown to be highly ineffective, at least against the latest variants of the virus. But nevertheless, they say this is a pandemic. The normal rules shouldn't apply.
Right.
My response to that is, well, first of all, I'm in legal speak, I'm what would be called a textualist or an originalist, right? I believe in reading and understanding a legal document according to its own words, right? And the understanding, the common understanding of those words at the time it was written. All right. So when it comes to the Constitution, that means we have to view the Constitution in the way that the framers intended for it to be viewed, the people who wrote the Constitution. So let's get in our time capsule or our DeLorean, whatever you want to use. Let's go back to the Constitutional Convention. And we have to remind ourselves, the men who wrote the words of the First Amendment, they were no strangers to wars, to plagues, to famines, to rebellions, to insurrections, to, I mean, you name it, right? They experienced all of it. And yet when they wrote the First Amendment, they didn't say, maybe we ought to make sure that this provision for the free exercise of religion, maybe we ought to make an exception, or put a little asterisk or a footnote and say this provision does not apply during a time of pandemic, or this doesn't apply during a time of war, or this doesn't apply to the military, because those are, that's different, or the kind of whataboutism that we get a lot these days. They could have done that. They were smart, brilliant, genius people, but they didn't. They chose not to. They chose to say, despite look, this is a group of men who knew that we were about to go to war with King George in Great Britain, the most powerful military on the planet at that time, the most powerful empire on the planet. And yet they said, nope, this First Amendment is this important to us. We're not going to make exceptions to it. So yes, as you pointed out, that's exactly what the court held. Yeah. And we got that victory, at least preliminarily, at the district court stage, precisely because I think the judge and the court recognized exactly the words that you just read.
Yeah. This is super important to the average citizen. Sometimes we look at the military and we think, oh, it doesn't apply to our life, right? But it's super important to the rest of us, because right now, entire states like Maine are removing the religious exemption from the review for this medical vaccination, these mandates. They're reviewing it and removing it in multiple states as we speak because of the emergency authorization stuff that people are saying. But I love this because this will apply to all of us, right? Every person in uniform has the right to request and be granted a religious exemption. This isn't about the 35 SEALs and servicemen and women. It's about the future of our military. And I think it's about the future of religious freedom for all of us as citizens. So thank you. Thanks for serving. Thanks for going after that. We're praying for you, and we're praying for that this goes all the way to the Supreme Court and we get a major win. I know you have a lot of experience doing that as well.
Well, you talked about this is about more than the military, and you're exactly right. It's actually about national security. Military religious freedom is an issue that has been a passion of mine. Going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, right? Your cause, find your calling and find your cause. Yes. Defending and advocating for religious freedom in our military has been the cause that the Lord has placed upon my heart for years now. And the more I thought about it and the more I researched it, I really began to realize, and so I've been saying this, that religious freedom is a national security issue. So it's really about the security of our nation. And here's why. If you kick out 35 Navy SEALs, right? So these 35 SEALs that we represent collectively, more than 350 years of military experience, more than 100 combat deployments. You can't replace that. You can't just go to boot camp and say, hey, give me 35 Navy SEALs with 350 years of experience and 100 combat deployments, right? And then somebody, rubs their hands together and poof, there they are. That doesn't happen. It takes years to develop that kind of leadership, expertise, experience, etc. And so if you kick them out, that's going to leave a void, right? Now, extrapolate that across the entire Department of Defense and look at the numbers, the sheer numbers of people who are being kicked out or being threatened with kicked out, right? And they're not just special warfare operators, they're pilots, right? Our military pilots who are also extremely valuable and very difficult and costly to replace. And then you look at, I was just a lawyer. You can probably, replace a lawyer pretty easily in the military.
Maybe.
But the proverbial trigger pullers and door kickers, all right. And then now that's just purely from the mechanical, like, okay, I've got some bean counter who's basically moving, personnel on a spreadsheet. Okay, I need 100 guys in this unit and 100 guys in this unit, et cetera, et cetera. But I want you to think about it from a bigger perspective. I want everybody who's listening and watching to think about this is, what is the message that this is sending to America and to America's mothers and fathers who have to sign to allow their son or daughter to join the military? When the military is essentially saying, if you're a person of faith, or if you have deeply held convictions and values about what is important, what you put in your body, how you worship God or how you worship your creator, and the military is essentially saying, we don't care. We don't value those things, right? You have no rights. If you are a person of faith, your rights are suspended if you're in the military. Do you think any mother or father in America is going to give their blessing for their son or daughter to go join the military? Or even those young people who say, people like you and me, when we were younger and the nation had a call to service and there was a need or a crisis that arose. And I wanted to join and I wanted to serve, going back to post 9/11. But the military had been sending out these signals. Hey, we need people in the fight. We need people to serve. But if you're a person of faith, you're not welcome here. Because that's exactly what people are being told in this country right now. If you are a person of faith, you are not welcome in the military. What is that going to do from a readiness standpoint?
I'm taking notes because I can't believe what you're telling me. And you think about this, the level of cumulative experience that we're losing through this purge, if you will. Some people have referred to it as a purge. 350 years of experience. Not only that, but the investment, the financial investment that we have in each one of these folks is a disaster, right? And that's true. So let's extrapolate it, right? We've got our military, then we've got doctors and nurses. You can't replace them on a dime. We're trying to do it with the National Guard, which is irresponsible at best, heroic on their part for stepping in, but absolutely irresponsible from a leadership perspective. We talk about pilots. We talk about different positions that cannot be replaced easily. And we're just throwing away that cumulative experience. We're putting people in buckets of essential versus non-essential, which is absolutely incredible to me, especially when you consider this military piece. Most people that are attracted to the military, I have to believe, love America. Why else would you even consider sacrificing your own life and well-being if you didn't love and believe in what you were defending? I mean, we're defending freedom at home. We're promoting freedom around the world. We are freedom fighters as a country. So to pull this idea of, religious exemption or belief, to segregate and to discriminate against a whole class of people, a whole group of people based upon their belief system, or even just their personal medical decisions, your recruiting efforts in the military are going to dry up like crazy. We're going to have a lack of resources, people resources to defend freedom, won't we?
Well, it's not that the recruiting efforts are going to have problems. They already are.
Jeez.
Right. I mean, the numbers from inside the military are starting to bear that out, that we're having a hard time finding people. So they're starting. So what do they inevitably do? They have to lower their standards, right? They have to start making exceptions for people with criminal records and things like that, or people with a history of drug use, to start widening that aperture. And you talked about, the love of country being one of the main motivators for people to serve. It certainly is and was for me. But let's think about it. Let me put it slightly differently. Okay, that the message now that the military is sending across America to people of faith is you're not welcome, right? We don't want you. And, famously, I believe this was G.K. Chesterton who said this. It may have been somebody else, but for whatever reason, I think it's Chesterton. And he said, the true soldier doesn't fight because he hates the enemy that stands in front of him. He fights because he loves the country that stands behind him. And the problem that we're going to find ourselves running into in this in America is that I think we're now heading down the path of causing people to hate the country, or at least question the country that stands behind them, and the motivations. And you mentioned the word purge earlier, and really, I don't know of any other way to describe it than this is an apparent political purge, right? You combine the vaccine mandate and the fact that people of faith are the ones that get the short stick, right? And you combine that with the recent headlines about the Department of Defense's counter-extremism, activities and these efforts that they've taken to get rid of extremists. Look, the president of the United States went on record and said that white supremacists are the greatest threat to national security. So then the Secretary of Defense goes on record and says, yes, but 99.9% of people in the military are not extremists. Okay, which one is it, right? Which one is it? And so obviously, we know that the president as commander-in-chief outranks the Secretary of Defense. So of course, the Department of Defense took its marching orders from the White House and spent millions and millions of dollars to create a countering extremism working group to try to come up with a new definition of extremism. And this new definition of extremism now captures conduct. It prohibits and bans and even criminalizes conduct that's always been protected by the First Amendment, right? And so once again, the military is telling people, I'll give you a couple of examples. If somebody advocates, the definition of advocates can even include clicking like or share on social media. If they advocate for a cause that would discriminate against a protected class, that is extremism that can be punished by disciplinary action in the military. And so when we say, so that sounds good, right? Oh yeah, I don't want anybody advocating for discrimination. But the devil is in the details, Jimmy. If you look at how they define that, what is a discriminating against a protected class? That can mean if a Christian simply says that I believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman, they're now an extremist, or at least they could be accused of being an extremist and punished for that. If somebody says, I believe that life begins at conception and that we should protect life in the womb, right? They can be accused and charged in the military with discriminating against a woman's right to abortion. And so, again, I bring this full circle and say, what message are we sending to people in this country about what it means to serve in our military, right?
That's right.
Are we sending them the message that our military is an institution that's going to uphold American values and it's going to protect everybody and serve everybody regardless of what your beliefs are? Or is it saying, no, there is a particular political ideology that is now at the top of the totem pole and that we will subordinate everything else to that? And if you don't get in line with the political ideology that the current administration is promoting, you're not welcome in the military. What is that going to do to our recruiting numbers and our national security? And I'll make one last point on this, and then I'll stop. But because I know I'm beating this dead horse, but okay, just look at the headlines from the last 2 or 3 months. Okay, we had China firing a hypersonic weapon around the planet. We have North Korea, all right, making the threats that they always make about nuclear proliferation. We have Iran violating the deal that they struck with President Obama and enriching uranium. We also have terrorists overrunning our embassy in Yemen and taking hostages. Guess who's called in for hostage situations in a situation like that? It's usually the Navy SEALs, right? We've seen movies like Captain Phillips, right? And Zero Dark 30, and Benghazi and what happened there, that debacle. The Navy SEALs are the ones who are called in. So think about, of the clients that First Liberty represents, they should be on that next flight to Yemen to help take back our embassy. They should be fighting for our national security. They should be fighting for our freedoms. And instead, they're fighting for their careers. And that is absolutely un-American.
It is. I mean, the way you classified that, for me, makes this, it elevates the importance. Sometimes we look at it as a religious freedom issue, which it certainly is, but it's part of a much bigger problem, right? And I wrote down here, it's a total rejection of our traditional values. In fact, it's worse than a rejection. It's actually a dismantling of those values, of those traditional values. And it's a political, ideological, religious purge going on in our military. And one word just kind of stuck out to me there, the word distraction. This is an absolute distraction from mission and our readiness to defend freedom, both here at home, but also to defend freedom around the world. We're completely distracted with nonsense. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because you put things in context. You take it out of this case of religious freedom and you expand it into the implications that are derived from it. What does this do to our readiness? What does this do to our preparedness? And it is, I feel like we've got a massive leak in the boat. And I couldn't be more thankful that you're on this case and that we're going to win. I just believe that, I believe good wins in the end. I believe that, these are principles that are godly principles. And I believe that this goes back to our founding fathers trying to create an environment that respected people's faith and recognize the divine providence of God, which is also something that we're losing in some ways. But thank you for serving in this way, Mike. Seriously, I'm super thankful for you and the team at First Liberty. One more question. I know you've got a handful of pretty significant cases. I think you've identified maybe six key cases to watch for in 2020 as we continue to defend freedom. I know that one of them in particular is important to me because of my background with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and our access to bring our faith to the field, so to speak. I know that you're handling one of those cases with a coach. Tell us a little thumbnail sketch of a couple of cases that are cases you would consider are the ones to watch for 2022.
Well, the first one you mentioned is the Coach Kennedy case. So First Liberty Institute represents Coach Joe Kennedy, himself a retired Marine, combat veteran. After serving in the Marine Corps, he became a football coach for his old alma mater, Bremerton High School in Bremerton, Washington, which is just across the Puget Sound from Seattle. And for years, after every game, he would take to a knee and he would offer a brief 15 to 30 second prayer of thanksgiving for basically for the opportunity to be a coach, for what just happened on the field. And, if a player got injured or something like that, he would always obviously pray that they would, hey, I let Johnny, recover quickly so he can get back out on the field with us. This went on for years without any complaint or without incident. And the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. The school district learned about, or actually it was the school district's attorneys learned about what Coach Kennedy was doing, said that they probably ought to investigate because they had some concerns about violating the so-called separation of church and state for a public high school football coach to be doing this. Mm-hmm. And the long story short is they ordered him not to pray anymore. And, Coach, like I said, is a retired Marine combat veteran, and they messed with the wrong Marine.
I'll bet they did.
I fought for these freedoms. I'm not about to give them up, is sort of his response. And They issued him all sorts of moving target directives. You can't pray with the players. Said, I don't have any interest in praying with the players. I just want to pray by myself. Then it was, well, you can't pray where people can see you praying, right? And it was, it was ridiculous, right? Because he's kneeling for 15 to 30 seconds after the game is over. You can't tell the difference between whether he's tying his shoe or looking for a lost contact lens, and so basically the school said, if you want to talk to the fans, you can talk to the fans. If you want to talk to your players, you can talk to the players. But if you talk to God, you're fired. And like I said, they messed with the wrong Marine. He ended up getting fired for praying after the game. And this case is now, when I say it's at the U.S. Supreme Court, the Supreme Court has not yet taken it up. We're waiting and praying that the Supreme Court will take this case. And if they do take the Coach Kennedy case, it could have major implications nationwide for the rights of any person who works for the government. Because as a high school football coach at a public high school, you're a government employee, and that's what's essentially at stake here. As do government employees, just like we were talking about with people in the military. Do you lose your rights just because you pull down a government paycheck every month, or do you retain those rights as an American citizen? And obviously, we are hopeful that the Supreme Court will take up this case and rule in our favor. Other cases, we recently had oral argument at the Supreme Court on a major school choice case that originated in Maine. So that case will decide whether or not parents retain the right to be able to send their kids to a private Christian school or other religious school free from government discrimination. We have another case that similar to Coach Kennedy, we're hopeful that the Supreme Court will take up, that originated in Virginia, in Fredericksburg, Virginia, in which we represent a church who had a former employee. And I don't want to get into the weeds of the legal doctrines or whatever. Suffice it to say, the court in the state of Virginia decided that it was a better interpreter of the church's book of religious order than the church was. And so the court was essentially telling the church how it was supposed to govern its own affairs when it came to employees and whatnot. And essentially, I mean, I'm only very slightly paraphrasing here, Jimmy, the court told the church, no, you're interpreting your own religious doctrine the wrong way. Let us interpret it for you. And so we've appealed that to the U.S. Supreme Court. You can imagine the implications of that, right? If that goes the wrong way. And, I know we're running short on time, but those are the ones that are just at the U.S. Supreme Court. And we've got a number of others that are sort of at one level below the Supreme Court. And then obviously you've got our Navy SEALs case as well. Yeah.
It's amazing to me. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking about that our educational system is a primary battleground today, right? And especially, of course, with religious freedom, but also with parental rights in general. The idea that the parents are the primary educator, the parents are the ones that are actually have the authority in our school system, and that's being chipped away over and over again. And I love what you said is it's the same exact thing that's happening with the military. Do you suspend your constitutional rights and freedoms based on the job that you have? It is, I mean, that's a stunning question. And if we lose, then there's no limitation to the way that can be infringed upon. There's none. The government will have complete control over it. So I'm super thankful. Thanks for being on the front lines, Mike. I mean, you've connected a lot of dots for me today to show that what seems like a single issue actually has broad implications for freedom across the board. And we're super thankful for everything you're doing, everything First Liberty is doing. Tell us a little bit, just in brief, tell us a little bit about First Liberty and how you're able to do what you're able to do.
First Liberty Institute is a national religious liberty law firm. We're actually the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on defending religious liberty. We're a one issue firm. We defend religious liberty for all Americans. We do it free of charge. which is also important, I think, for people to know. We are 100% donor funded. So we never, ever send our clients a bill for the services we provide. And I mean, going on several decades now, we have an incredible win rate of over 90% in all of our litigated cases. So the Lord has blessed us, and again, it goes back to the subject we talked about at the very beginning. I think it's because those of us who work at First Liberty, this is our calling and our cause. We believe in what we're doing. We believe in the Constitution. We believe in America, and so at First Liberty, we believe that we are one of the last best hopes for freedom in this country.
For sure. And I love the fact that that everything is pro bono. All of the expenses associated with this are covered. A 91% win rate. I'm thinking that's Hall of Fame. In baseball, you hit 340, Hall of Fame. In legal practice, you hit 91%. That's pretty much Hall of Fame, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, it may be even higher than 91. I just know it's over 90. So yeah. But like I said, we've been very blessed over the years. But I also think a lot of that is we're very strategic. I think that's something a lot of people miss when it comes to legal practice. Sometimes the most important cases are the ones that you don't take, right? Because if you take a case with bad facts or that's in a bad jurisdiction, we talk about the infamous Ninth Circuit, then you could be setting yourself up for a monumental loss that's going to result in bad precedent that people are going to be stuck with for years or decades. Yes. And then, then sometimes there are those where you realize it's an opportunity to undo bad precedent. So you take, you got to have the right balance of aggressiveness, risk taking, and smarts. And I think we really bring a lot of that to the table at First Liberty. And so again, it's been one of my greatest professional honors. The way I look at it, Jimmy, is I said at the very beginning, I'm proud to be a U.S. Marine because I love serving my country. At First Liberty Institute, I'm still serving my country. I'm still defending the Constitution. I just wear a different uniform now. Yeah, I love that. I love it. Well, we are super grateful. Thanks for investing the time in us and our audience. And we've got a lot of military veterans, a lot of people that are serving currently that are going to be super encouraged by what you've said. And also, we're going to be praying for you all because we know that this is a spiritual battle and we're in that fight for you as well. We don't want to establish bad precedent. We want to undo bad precedent. And I know that you are super strategic in that fight. Mike, thanks so much, buddy. God bless you, man. God bless. Thanks for having me. You bet.